Hello and welcome to the latest Downtown podcast. I'm Jim Hancock in the chair today, in the absence of a very busy Frank McKenna. Also with us is Martin Liptrot, who's Downtown's Director of Strategy and Partnerships, and Joe Phillips, former Communications Director for Paddy Ashdown, and now a contributor to a number of outlets, including ours and GB News. And so the decisive moment approaches. The people of Makerfield have the fate of the nation in their hands. That's probably a bit overblown, but it is possibly the most important by-election since 1938. I remember it well, when the people of Oxford rejected Neville Chamberlain's appeasement policy towards Hitler. Then we come to the resignation of the Defence Secretary, John Healey, last week. And the big question now is whether Dan Jarvis, the new Defence Secretary, can actually get any more money out of the government. There seems to be big confusion as to whether the Prime Minister is going to demand that the departments give up more of their cash and perhaps even introduce some welfare reforms. Under 16s are to be banned from using their phones for social media, but we asked whether this is the wrong way round and whether the media giants should be forced to clean up their act and actually allow children to use mobile phones for the useful purposes for which they were originally intended.
The return of the sausages.
All sorts of things that I would have wanted as a kid that I couldn't have, right? Famously, Sky TV.
How'd that happen? I guess I just forgot what was going on.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
Yay, it worked.
So, Martin, you've been to Makerfield. What's the feeling there?
Well, it's amazing how active everybody is in Makerfield. You wander through the different suburbs and the likes, and there's posters of both sides up proudly displayed. So on that evidence, it feels like it's going to be close. But then I'm also a big fan of the bookmakers who don't like to give money away, and they've got Andy at 4-1 on and Reform at 3-1. To put some additional context in that, you can get the Tories at 500-1. So there's with Royal Ascot today, there's going to be money moving around, but the bookmakers typically read the room the right way. So I think Andy, if turnout and the ground operation that clearly Labour has the upper hand on works and the vote gets out, we expect to see Andy Burnham returned as the MP for Makerfield.
Are you less sure, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's too close to call. But it's in, from what Martin says, and I am cheered by the apparent engagement of people, whether that is sticking up posters or going out canvassing, and a lot of interest, which I'm sure has equally irritated residents who don't want to be vox popped by the 49th TV crew in the space of 10 minutes. But it is about turnout. I think, the polls are very close still. Giving Labour a 5-point lead over Reform. I think Reform's problem is coming from Restore, Rupert Lowe's even further right-wing bunch of lunatics, which is eating into the Reform vote. The Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats and probably the Greens are not really anywhere, and one would hope that people on the sort of progressive side of politics will just, if necessary, hold their nose, because it is a battle between Andy Burnham and Reform's plumber. But it is bigger than that, as you said in the introduction. I mean, this is the beginning of the end, or the end of the end for Keir Starmer for sure. It's a huge gamble politically and personally for Andy Burnham. And if Reform were to win, it's a real game changer for British politics. So, there's an awful lot riding on this, but I can hardly bear the thought of sitting there on Thursday night looking through my fingers from behind the sofa for a result to come in.
Yeah, it's interesting how the right-wing press has really attacked Restore over the weekend with their alleged fascist connections. So you can see the sort of conservative establishment are really worried about this split on the right. And it is a little strange why Restore have figured in this, but I think some polling had them as on 6 or 7%. And I understand the position is that they are very, very strong on social media. This is often invisible to old fogies like me, that they really have got quite a good connection with that and have connected with people. And obviously, if it is a tight contest, then 6 or 7% for Restore could obviously damage Farage's chances.
There's no love lost between Farage and Lowe, so that's probably what's motivating Rupert Lowe to throw his Elon Musk dollars into this campaign. Rebecca Shepherd, who's Restore's candidate in the by-election, has been quite impactful, mobilising women voters, and there's some talk that she's ahead in some kind of pollings there, which is unusual because all the kind of psephology and insights we've been hearing is that women have moved to the left whilst blokes have gone to the right on the political spectrum. So she's doing some things right. I'm not a particular fan of hers, but she is doing so. I think Labour's campaign is the most curious. First of all, the posters. Andy looks like the third proclaimer in these kind of GIF-style pictures that they've presented of him. It's not particularly prime ministerial looking. So that's they've obviously decided blokeism, Manchesterism, whatever other isms of the moment is most important. So that's kind of interesting. What the campaign does do is it allows you to give Keir Starmer a kick and still vote Labour. So I think that's probably the salvation that the Labour campaign will benefit from, along with what Joe said earlier, that those on the left, soft left, hard left, far left, might vote tactically just to keep Reform from having this victory.
And no sign of Sir Keir Starmer on any of the leaflets that I've seen, Joe.
No, and it is very much about vote for Andy. It's not even necessarily vote for Labour, it's vote for Andy. It is a very personal campaign, and I think that is very significant. And I think that also tells you quite a lot about the autonomy that the local Labour Party have had from the central office, if you like, Labour HQ, in order to run the campaign that they hope will encourage people to do, as Martin says, give Keir Starmer a kicking without letting Reform in.
Yes, well, I think the National Executive, after bigfooting Andy out of the way in Gorton, have taken a back seat to allow the local party to continue with this. So, I mean, at the moment, it looks as if and people have got irritation about being used in that sort of way that might count against Andy Burnham, but if we may, just before we leave this topic, just project forward to what might happen. I mean, things swing around, but the latest feeling, Martin, seems to be that Andy Burnham will move fairly quickly. I mean, we were talking last week about how he would want Wed Streeting to enter the race first of all, but some of the latest indications are that Burnham will need to immediately ride the wave of I'm the man who can beat Reform and challenge Sir Keir Starmer. Is that your reading of it?
I've heard that. I'm not sure I would advocate that if I was on Team Andy. I think that he needs it to be a competition, not a coronation. So there needs to be a debate about ideas within the Labour Party, and he needs to formulate those, and he needs to communicate those not only to his new friends in the House, but also across the wider party. How
can you have a debate without having a leadership election? I mean, you can't just have a sort of forums going on, can you?
Well, I think Andy could use the conference as a kind of moment to raise his profile across the party more broadly. I think Wes Streeting will have to pull the trigger. So for him to be in the competition, he needs to call it, in my opinion. I think that as we get closer to the autumn statement, that's probably the moment that it all comes into sharp focus, when we have to the government has to make decisions about spending, about defence, about welfare reform and immigration. And I think that's when the politics will re-enter the campaign. So I think Andy would do well to not rush summer recess, to try and get this through. I think he's better off building his case, coming through conference and getting support and having MPs and former MPs and Blair and whoever else say he's the right man for the gig, and then take it on then, in my opinion.
Well, that's very interesting. I honestly haven't heard that scenario, that it should be a long game. I mean, the immediate criticism of that is that the whole summer will be filled with internal infighting, and that the idea is to minimise the damage. Also, from opponents of Starmer's point of view, you know, he has the reins of government, particularly when Parliament's in recess, and he continue to, and let's not forget, he seems determined that he's going to be a candidate in this race. So he has the whole summer to build his position. But nevertheless, this is rumbling on. But I respect what Martin says, but I'd certainly like to get your view on his interesting theory that, you know, this could go on well into the autumn.
Well, it's not that long. I mean, I think that, you know, the problem is, and this is partly sort of media hype, and it's partly, you know, the way we do politics in this country now, expecting it to be like a Deliveroo driver turning up and just change prime ministers when we're bored with this one. You know, Andy Burnham may get elected on Thursday. He may then sit as a backbench MP. It would be utterly ridiculous for anybody to think that he is going to effect change immediately, even if Keir Starmer said on Friday, I tell you what, mate, it's all yours. Because if it's a coronation, there would be undeniably a call for a general election. There will be huge dissent within the Parliamentary Labour Party and the wider Labour Party, not to mention, you know, the rest of the country who'd think, hang on a minute, you got a walloping great majority, you've had 2 years and comprehensively screwed up, and we all hate you, so now you're going to put somebody else in whose ideas we have not heard. So I think Martin's right. I think Andy Burnham needs to secure his base. He needs to be really clear and in some ways echo, and I didn't agree with all of it, but what Tony Blair was saying in his long essay a couple of weeks back. It's not just about slogans, it's about how you're going to do things. Because make no mistake, Andy Burnham will have a very small window to be able to do the things that Keir Starmer hasn't been able to do, whether that's cutting welfare to fund defence or cutting welfare full stop. And he won't have the backing of the Parliamentary Labour Party if he doesn't get it right. So if he is then seen to be, you know, the same as Keir Starmer but speaks human and looks like the third proclaimer, that's not going to help him, the Labour Party, or the country. He needs to get it absolutely right and go when he's ready, knowing that he's got the support of the Parliamentary Labour Party and having given them the really clear message that if we don't get this right, the other lot will come in and they will absolutely make it a lot worse for the people we want to protect. So I completely agree with Martin. I think it's a much better approach. You know, we're only a month away from recess, so actually it makes an awful lot of sense to spend the summer really doing it and putting your thoughts out there, talking to people, you know, talking cross-party if need be, to the Liberal Democrats and the Greens.
So Keir Starmer is in office for the Labour Party conference.
I think he could resign at the Labour Party conference, or there could be a competition contest just before Labour conference.
Yeah, I mean, we must move on shortly, but you know, disagreement is the stuff of life on Downtown Podcast. I think that you two, your ideas are fraught with problems, because if he stays till the conference, then there's a leadership election, the autumn statement, what happens to the crucial autumn statement? Then, you know, we get towards Christmas and a new leader's installed. He's barely got, you talk about making his mark, he's only got about 2 years left of the Parliament. But anyway, you know, it's very, very interesting issue that Martin's and you've raised there about going longer. It's a very interesting one. And we'll see what happens. Now let's move on to John Healey's resignation. I mean, we all remember Michael Heseltine walking out over the Westland aircraft, but we don't all remember. Francesca, our producer, wants to be careful with that. But, you know, Michael Heseltine resigning over the Westland helicopter issue, and that was a question of procurement from Europe, and Heseltine was in favour of the European dimension of that. But losing defence secretaries is a serious matter. I think we can all agree. I mean, you know, in retrospect, we can see that the tension was building on this question of how much money was going to be available for defence. But I don't think we quite saw that would happen. So Martin, give us your reaction first of all to John Healey's departure. Is that a fatal stab for the Prime Minister?
No, but it's damaging, isn't it? I mean, John Healey is definitely of the kind of sensible, grown-up political wing of the Labour movement. Took Al Carnes with him as well, of course, who isn't for me, but is widely talked about as this kind of, the action man figure that the Labour Party might need for celebrity kind of voterism. I think what I'm interested in is what's the motivation behind wanting to spend more on defence. Yes, we've got troubles in the world, and Russia's situation is not resolved in any way. But I think this has probably got a lot more to do with successful lobbying. I think when you say more spending in defence, it goes to Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems and various defence contractors. It doesn't go to pay for squaddies in boots and bullets in guns. It goes on enormous computerised billion-dollar missile systems. And I would imagine the defence sector has done a remarkably good job of making that feel like it's something that we must do. Probably better job, or almost as good a job as the tech giants have done in making it every mum and dad's responsibility to monitor their phones, not themselves. But we'll come to that, I'm sure. So I think we can get a bit carried away with what we think defence spending is needed for. We need to appease Trump and the Americans to make sure that our percentages are nearer to what they expect of us if they're to continue to give us the blanket coverage and support that we require at a NATO level. So I think that this is perhaps a bit of industrial strength lobbying that's got us to this position. So
you don't agree we need another 10 or 15 billion pounds for defence?
No, I think we probably do, but I don't think the public are clamouring for it. I think it's an engineered conversation, but yeah.
No, well, possibly the public aren't. I mean, this is a slight diversion, but I don't think the public's mentality. I think Martin's right, Joe. The public's mentality is not for spending an awful lot more on defence, but without overdoing the 1930s comparison, it took a long time to turn around public opinion, though it had turned by 1938, as I was illustrating in my introduction. But nevertheless, the perils, as we found out yesterday, when that man was convicted for trying to commit arson against the Prime Minister and all the associated things. I mean, a low-level war with Russia is already underway.
Absolutely. And it has been for very, very many years, and that has been set out very clearly. And I think that, of course, the public don't want to have money spent on things that they can't see. It's a bit like none of us want to pay for house insurance, but boy, do we need it, and let's hope we've got it when we do need it. And I think that, warfare, certainly since the invasion of Ukraine, has changed so dramatically that I think to a certain extent, I think that Martin makes a very good point. And I think that we have heard the generals and the army chiefs and all the rest of them campaigning for what might be a more traditional type of warfare, and we see the usual old nonsense in the Mail and the Telegraph about, our warships are broken, we'd have to go to sea in a pea green boat with a paddle and a broom handle, and all of that nonsense, when we know perfectly well that actually drones are far more effective than tanks, and we know that cybersecurity is absolutely paramount. And you mentioned the case against the three foreign nationals who were deployed by a Russian operative to carry out these attacks on Keir Starmer, which also led to an awful lot of revolting rumours that Keir Starmer had somehow been involved with these young men in some sort of sex triangle or something like that, and this was revenge. And all of those circulated on social media. And, that is the war that we should be fighting. And I think, although it's very hard to articulate that, I think, MI6 chiefs have done it for an awfully long time. So have GCHQ. Going back to 2018, there was a report carried out by one of the universities in Scotland into the social media manipulation of election material. Now, that is a war by any other standard. We talked earlier about Restore and Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe not only is successful on social media, he makes an awful lot of money out of it. So that is a way of Elon Musk funneling his funding into the British political system. So warfare is really complicated, and there is no doubt that we do need to spend more on it. It is utterly ridiculous that in today's world we are spending more than twice as much on pensions than we are on defence. And I think that one of the things that where Starmer has got this so catastrophically wrong was having commissioned George Robertson, former Labour Defence Secretary, former NATO General Secretary, to carry out this report. He then sat on it for over a year. And that's why I think you've seen John Healey, who, as Martin said, loyalist, sensible, grown up, pragmatic, after all the delays and the shilly-shallying and the nonsense and the attacks from America, and seeing that Germany is expanding its defence spending and other NATO members are, upping their spend on defence, that Starmer wasn't prepared to bite the bullet. And I know that's an unfortunate pun. And I think it's that frustration that finally, got to him. Like, you've got to do something. You can't just kick it into the long grass and then come out with something saying that we're going to spend, extra money on this, that, and the other, when everybody knows we are facing a crisis. And I've said it before on this podcast and elsewhere. We need to build resilience, and that is not just about defence. It's about cybersecurity. It's about water and energy. It's about resilience, having a healthy population. It's about shelter. It's about civil defence contingencies. None of those things are in place. And the first job of any government is to keep the country safe.
Martin, I think you were right to remind us, that the military establishment, the old retired generals, are very good at influencing the media, and then the big companies behind them. That is certainly true. Can I just try and see, notwithstanding your reservations about this, Nisa Nandi, the culture secretary, who's increasingly being put up on awkward Sundays to defend the government, and I think Nisa's doing a better and better job at that, actually. But she seemed to suggest that there was going to be another whip round amongst departments, but then she was sort of contradicted by Downing Street on Monday. I mean, but is it credible that, what I'm interested in is, did Dan Jervis, when he got the call, because it was quite a long time on Thursday before a new Defence Secretary was appointed, say, OK, Keir, I'll do it, but I can't do it and defend the amount of money that you've given me and my predecessor has denounced as inadequate. You've got to find more money for me. Or was he so keen to get the job that he said, yes, Keir, I'll accept your package and try and defend it?
I tend to think the latter. I think it was a great honour to be asked to have one of the big departments. There is, as we said earlier, a parliamentary and political shift probably going to happen in the coming months. Probably sees it as his opportunity to have the big hat. So, never underestimate the egos of politicians, perhaps. But I just think that it's being defined a little bit as welfare versus defence, isn't it? And that's the choice we've got to make. And I think that's an incorrect framing of where we're at. Joe's right. The resilience that we need goes across our energy systems, it goes across our water, it goes across our borders, it goes, everything. And that's what needs funding. And there's only one way to do it, and that's either one of two options: raise taxes or cut costs. And that's not politically palatable going into the kind of scenario we're looking forward to over the next few months.
I mean, possibly the last question on this subject, Joe. Given that the Prime Minister is constantly accused of being indecisive, did the wrong person go in this stramash? I.e., should the Prime Minister, I agree with my Defence Secretary, find that extra money to Rachel Reeves, and if you can't, Rachel, there's the door for you, but not for John Healey?
Well, yes, and that would have been a very brave thing to do, and he probably should have got rid of Rachel Reeves an awfully long time ago, because we've seen and heard it time and time again that Keir Starmer is too weak to override the Treasury, and Rachel Reeves who has proved to be a bigger disappointment in my view than Keir Starmer, is so hidebound by the Treasury books that she can't look at anything beyond the short term. She's not political any more than Keir Starmer is. They can't read the room, they can't read the runes, and I just think, yes, it would have been the very sensible thing to do, but it was never going to happen.
You're not shaking your head there, Martin. You want to defend Rachel?
Yeah, I don't think she's. I would agree with Joe that she's not played her politics particularly well, but the city trusts her, and the city thinks that she's safe hands. And all that kerfuffle that Andy got into a few weeks ago about whether he was in hot to the bond markets or not, that matters. You might not want it to, but it does matter. And stability is what the Treasury has to deliver most importantly, and she does a good job of doing that with that community. Politically, doesn't punch hard.
Right, let's come on to our final topic now. And over the years, things happen that have nothing to do with the sort of the great geopolitical stuff that we talk about in economy and defence and foreign affairs and things like that, but changes that fundamentally affect our life. And if you think back to the 1960s, the end of hanging, the legalization of homosexuality, and then later on the ban on smoking in pubs, and have we reached another moment on that front with the attempt to curb the pernicious influence of some aspects of mobile phone use by our under 16s? So, Joe, do you want to set us off on this? What is quite a significant social development?
Yeah, it is a very significant social development, and it's a little bit like, drink driving laws and seat belts in cars, which were met with this, and the smoking ban. All of these things were met with the same, oh, it's unworkable, it's ridiculous, it's going to destroy businesses, it's going to do this, that, and the other, it's the nanny state, and so on and so forth. I mean, the devil will always be in the detail in something as ambitious as this. And I am completely on the fence, actually, as to whether it's the right thing to do. I think it's the right thing to start the ball rolling. I'm deeply disappointed that the government hasn't had the balls to take on the tech companies. And as Martin said earlier, has left it to mum and dad and, Mr. So-and-so in year 7 to police this. But it does give a little bit of armoury, if you like, to those parents and teachers and carers to say, no, it's against the law. And as Keir Starmer said in his statement yesterday, just because kids still go out and buy fags and booze when it's illegal doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't try and ban it. It does allow you to do things. There's a whole load of arguments, and they are equally valid on both sides. We've heard Ian Russell, Molly Russell's father, say that this is the wrong approach. We've had equally, articulate and dignified bereaved families saying, no, this is good, it's got to start the ball rolling. We don't know until it starts. But what it is doing, it is beginning to send out a signal that this constant scrolling, the social media, the toxicity is something that we should all be aware of. And actually, in my blog for Downtown this week, which you can all read, I'm sure you're waiting with bated breath, I do argue that grown-ups, including the government, and in particularly the government, should say, actually, you know what? Elon Musk is pernicious. His meddling and his influence in British politics is so appalling, we're going to come off X. We're not going to use it anymore. We can do that. Just like people in Liverpool stopped buying The Sun. Just like those of us who campaigned against apartheid stopped banking with Barclays. You can actually use your consumer power to say, I'm not engaging with these things. And I think just because, there's a way around it and people will find a way around, even if it keeps 30% of people away from the potentially harmful effects, or makes people think twice, and maybe makes children say to their parents, it's fine you telling us not to do it, but mum, dad, put your phones down, talk to us. It begins a conversation. But what I find astonishing is for a man who just will sit on a fence and twiddle his thumbs, Keir Starmer has removed at remarkable speed to do this.
Yeah, well, there is some sort of speculation that it was an attempt to related to the Makerfield by-election. But
No, I don't think. I mean, I don't.
No.
I don't think that does.
Yeah, no,
But
let's move back to the substantive thing and ask Martin this. You know, there is an argument that the whole thing is the wrong way round. That the media companies, the media giants, should be forced to clean up their platforms. You know, to stop this all these algorithms and things that encourage scrolling, endless scrolling, and all that sort of thing, and also do far more to remove the filth and from their platforms, so that children are able to use it. I mean, I'm trying to think of an analogy. Someone's spreading glass in a playground so that the children can't play. Well, they shouldn't do that, so that the playground is clear for them to play in. What do you think about? Have the government been tough enough with the media giants?
100% not. So the decision is to make it a consumer rather than a provider responsibility. Look, we've got expectations of our legacy broadcasters about what is and isn't suitable for putting on our TV screens and watersheds or whatever you want to call them. We're used to that. Social norms or expectations are met through that. Now the media is different and the platforms are different, but we know that the tech companies behind this, could make those changes if they wanted to. I mean, look, every single keystroke on your phone is a monetization moment, isn't it? So they 100% know how to turn that on and off when they're making money out of it. So I think that there's probably, hopefully, a second wave of this legislation as it goes through that says these are the expectations on the social media providers and the companies. These are the expectations of phone carrier companies who allow that access to take place. So I think, hoping that there's a second wave where there's a bit more expectation coming from the government towards the social media providers themselves.
Joe, obviously Peter Kyle, the technology minister, wants this country to be a world leader in AI and work and have a good relationship with the tech giants in terms of our economy. Do you think that that's a drumbeat that's been going on in the background? Because the government have, as the Tories rightly point out, they disciplined their MPs to actually vote against this only about 2 or 3 months ago. So do you think they're, obviously we can't tolerate the behavior of the tech companies in that respect, but do you think there could be some economic damage here?
No, I think there'll be a lot of bluster and huff and puff and threats from Musk and Zuckerberg and all the rest of it. But I mean, this is not closing things down. It is just trying to limit it. Booze companies didn't go out of business just because it was made illegal for people to buy beer under the age of 18. And cigarette companies, as far as I can tell, are still making profits and using them, to sell tobacco in other forms and in other countries. So I think, firms can adapt. And I think that, the point is, your analogy is very good, Jim. If you've spread glass across the playground, you don't say to the kids, oh, right, stay out of the playground. You can never use it again. And I do think, in a sense, that there has been a build-up from teachers and parents and, organisations like Mumsnet and the WI and NSPCC and Bernardis that has been saying to the government, for Christ's sake, do something. We're coming into the summer holidays where some kids will spend hours and hours and hours not going outside and sitting on their phones. And I think, this
well,
is...
they won't. I mean, it's going to be next spring before.
Yes,
it
I know,
in,
but
which
it
seems
allows
an awful long time, by the way.
Well, it isn't, and I think Keir Starmer's predilection would probably have been, no, let's get this right. Let's go through the lawyers. We'll have it ready for 2037 for a consultation. I mean, the fact that it's gone like this. So if it means that grannies and granddads and aunties and uncles can have conversations with their 16 and 14-year-old family members, you can begin to have a conversation, and then you can begin to have a conversation about how whether something is real. And the kids can say, but look, I am looking at BBC News, I am looking at Downtown's fabulous political podcast, I'm just watching it on YouTube. So I think we need to have a more grown-up conversation instead of pretending.
I think you're touching on something there, aren't you? I'm not bothered about kids scrolling and spending loads of times on the phone. That doesn't bother me. It's what they're scrolling to and what they're looking at.
Exactly.
Because I ride the train in every morning, and everybody on the way to work is on the phone. No one's reading the paper or talking to the person next to them. There's none of that. So we're all doing it. Problem is when you've got AI generated sex porn and you've got shaming and you've got all that kind of negative content, that's what you want removed. That's the glass you want picking up from your kind of fictional playground. That's what needs doing. It's not I don't care if kids are on their phones. That's part of being a kid these days. So but the content that they're accessing is where the restrictions need to come in. And I only see the tech companies as realistically being able to pull the plug on some of that.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, Martin. And that goes back to your question, Jim, about the sort of, the commercial stuff. You put pressure on the companies to make it safer so that consumers can, so it becomes a consumer driven thing. Safety belts were brought into cars, so motoring manufacturers had to work out how to fit safety belts in cars. It's not difficult. It probably is quite difficult actually, but you know what I mean? They know how to do this. They can stop pumping out filth. They can have this, and they can know, and Ofcom is completely and utterly useless. Chocolate teapots don't even come into it. They're not going to enforce anything. But I think there is an element of, people need to ask questions. Is this safe? Just as we've seen a whole groundswell, if you like, of knowledge and education and shared responsibility in the financial services, with people being scammed and banks taking more responsibility than they used to and carrying out checks and things and compensating people who are scammed. It is the beginning of something, and I think the government should be applauded for it.
Right, well, thank you both very much indeed. We'll be back next week where we'll reflect on the important events of Thursday, which are, of course, the Liverpool tennis tournament, which is sponsored by Downtown, then Downtown's birthday party in the evening, and then a minor matter of the Makerfield by-election. But for now, goodbye.